Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. It's a real pleasure to be back. Yes, starting a bit late this morning, but it's Saturday for all. Hope you're having a great weekend so far. And I'm broadcasting live from our nation, Ottawa.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Thank you so much for watching today. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. And we've got a lot to talk about today. And, uh, there's a time lag on my voice. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, this is a huge news story. Canada EV mandate must be repealed. Ford Canada CEO says.
For Northumberland, Clark.
In the Auditor General's scathing report on Tuesday, we learned the Liberals failed to put in place the necessary safety, procedures and controls to safeguard Canadian taxpayer dollars. The result? $64 million to ArriveScan's primary contractor, GC Strategies. Canadians work so hard for their money, Mr. Speaker. When will that money be returned? Will everyone in this House vote with Conservative to get Canadians' money back?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we thank the Auditor General for her work. Obviously, we can all agree in this House that misconduct of any kind in our procurement processes is completely unacceptable. It's notable that we've terminated all contracts and suspended security clearance for GC Strategies. An investigation and assessment were undertaken, and GC Strategies was deemed ineligible from receiving government contracts for 7 years. This matter has been referred to the RCMP, and legal matter is ongoing.
Member for Northumberland, Clark.
We hear those same talking points over and over again. However, the only guarantee that we can have that taxpayer dollars will actually
I'm going to go back to this story here because apparently you're not hearing the time lag, but I am. So we're just going to have to put up with it in this end. And this is incredible here because the Ford Canada is saying that they can't do the EV mandate anymore. This is Dan Mazier saying Mark Carney's government is banning the sale of gas-powered vehicles in Canada. By 2035, the Liberals will require that all new passenger vehicles be zero-emission vehicles. This is insane. Yes, it is. But here's something that's just incredible here. I reposted this morning on X. Distant Crow replying to me, actually. Ford is taking a $30,000 loss for every Mash and Lightning sold. They are nothing but trouble for Ford. So that's what we're dealing with in terms of Ford not being able to handle EV sales anymore because they're so low. Nobody wants these things. And this is absolutely insane. This is what we're dealing with in Canada. And this is putting the automobile industry out of business as if it didn't have enough problems. And clearly, it's got a lot of problems. So here's a story that was up in The Economist last week. We got a copy of it before it was taken down. And this is what it's all about. This is about a backdoor deal that Mark Carney has apparently made with the United States to offer all of our minerals, vital minerals. And the United States apparently already has an agreement with China and Ukraine for their vital minerals. So what's going on here? And here it says at Mr. Trump's Oval Office press conference, Mr. Carney declared that having met with the owners of Canada during the course of the campaign, it's not for sale. But in private discussions across the hall in the Roosevelt Room, the contours of Fortress Canada, Can-Am, were already being hammered out. People briefed on the negotiations say the United States would be guaranteed first right of refusal on Canadian resources. That is quite a surprise at a time when countries around the world are scrambling to line up their supplies. Now, I discussed this issue yesterday with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. She's aware of this story. The link to this story will be in the description. She is aware of this story, but this is not just the minerals they're talking about. What does it mean, first right of refusal on Canadian resources? Because the federal government can't make a promise like that. Natural resources are the exclusive territory of the provinces in this country. The federal government cannot negotiate on behalf of the provinces to say that we're going to give away our natural resources. Clearly, when I brought this up with Premier Smith yesterday, she said, hey, the Constitution of Canada guarantees the province's autonomy over their natural resources. So that is where we're at. That's the Constitution. So even if Mark Carney wants to introduce legislation to try to override that constitutional guarantee, the Constitution trumps that legislation automatically. And I can't overemphasize the importance of that. That means Mark Carney cannot unilaterally take over Alberta's natural resources or Saskatchewan's or any other province. So that means Alberta has final say about its oil and gas sales. And that's the way it's going to stay. So I can't, once again, this is an incredible admission in this article. I think it came down because the Carney administration said, hey, we're not ready for that yet, folks. And so I want to move to this one as well, because I have been warning you folks about this all week. Mark Carney is so game on increasing the defense budget by what, $9.3 billion to move our defense spending to 2% of our gross domestic product. However, he's talking about $225 billion Canadian to rearm Europe. And this is confirmed by June 23rd. Carney is going to be moving on this crazy idea of subsidizing European rearmament. And that means Ukrainian rearmament too. This is going to be billions, hundreds of billions of dollars wasted to ensure that Europe can threaten to start another war. The first two world wars started in Europe and spread around the globe. The third world war is apparently going to start there too if we don't introduce a note of sanity here. And of course, we're also looking at the same sort of thing happening in the Middle East as that conflict escalates by the day. And we're keeping our eyes on that. We'll be discussing that more in depth tomorrow. But God only knows what's going to happen next in that war. Because now, the last I saw, Iran has retaliated against Israel. The Golden Dome is working, but it's not working. So this is highly, highly problematic for world peace. And I want to just say we've got some great merchandise in the stream here. This is our Alberta proud merchandise. T-shirts, hats, and we've also got some great stickers that are going after this crazy liberal government. And I will showing you the merchandise store early today because we've got a lot more to show you. Yeah, so like I said, we've greatly expanded our product line. Here's some of the other new material. And like I said, the Alberta Proud selection is there. And I'm just waiting to see the response for some of this because I think it's really, really going to be of interest to a lot of you viewers. And here's some more of the Carney stickers that we've got available right now. If you think that Mark Carney poses a threat to this country, to Canada, please make those views well known. Because I tell you, this is a man in a hurry to introduce legislation that could potentially be catastrophic for this country. And I think that is something we have to remember. Mark Carney has a timeline that is probably twice as fast as Justin Trudeau ever was. And this is why he represents such a danger to Canada. I just want to play a little more of yesterday's question period. I did not put in the first question of the day because that's something we're going to be talking about tomorrow. It was about the Middle East. It was about how Canadians are reacting to this so-called preemptive strike by Israel, but we'll be talking more about that tomorrow.
It is a change in leadership. Liberals keep getting rich, Canadians keep getting the tax bill. And why on all heavens was the ministers promoted instead of fired?
Secretary, the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I know all of us can agree in this House that misconduct of any kind in our procurement processes is completely unacceptable. That's why our government has acted on this matter. An investigation was undertaken by OSIC. The company in question has been deemed ineligible for receiving any federal government contracts for 7 years, and the matter has been referred to the RCMP, and legal action is ongoing.
The Deputy de Beauce.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, this week the Auditor General released a scathing report on ArriveCan's primary contractor, GC Strategies. This company, with only 2 employees and currently under investigation by the RCMP, got a staggering $64 million from the Liberals. And worse, we don't even know if they did any work. The Conservatives have introduced a motion to ban this company for life. Will all members of this House vote to get Canadian taxpayers' money back?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm more than happy to repeat this as many times as the members opposite would like me to. Our government has taken a firm stance on this matter and said that any misconduct of any kind within our procurement processes is completely unacceptable. We have made improvements in the integrity of the system based on the Auditor General's report and recommendations. We've made sure that GC Strategies cannot no longer receive any government contracts for 7 years, and the matter has been referred to the RCMP for legal action.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, we're asking for a lifetime ban, not 7 years. The budget was $80,000 and the actual cost was $64 million, paid to only 2 people. That's 800 times the budget. It makes no sense. It's the taxpayers of Beauce and Canada who have been stuck with the bill. Why, with the Liberals, are politicians rewarded instead of being punished? The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I know that all of us in this House can agree on one thing, which is that the integrity of our procurement processes is of utmost importance. It's taxpayers' money that's in question, and we take that matter very seriously. We have conducted an investigation through the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance. They deemed GC Strategies as ineligible to receive any federal government contracts for 7 years, and we referred this matter to the RCMP for legal action.
I still say the Conservatives are kind of wasting their time on the same question day in, day out, because they still haven't addressed the most pressing issue facing the House of Commons Parliament in Canada right now from the Carney government, and that's Bill C2, the Stronger Borders Bill, which threatens to absolutely take away our basic freedom from being spied upon by the federal government. It could turn Canada into a digital currency cashless society. And at the very least, it's going to empower, that's even the wrong word. It's going to allow the RCMP and Canada Post to open your mail. This is a complete contravention of everything this country has ever believed in terms of privacy rights and in terms of being protected from the long arm of government, whether it's federal or provincial or municipal. We do not stand for this sort of thing in Canada. Now, I want, if you missed it yesterday, I'm going to play this again today. This is my interview with Premier Danielle Smith. I think it's worth watching, and we're so grateful to have her on the show. She'll be back again in a month or two to keep us updated on the Alberta agenda and what's going on with the Alberta Accord and how we're coping with the increasing popularity of the independence movement in that province. Thank you for joining me on Stand on Guard. It's my real pleasure to have the Premier of Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith, with me today. And of course, she's always a welcome guest. So many of you, every time we talk about Premier Smith or talk with her, you always come through with your comments. So wanted to ask you, Premier, you're facing a rising tide of separatism in Alberta. And in fact, I just talked to one of the biggest proponents of that this morning on this broadcast. And how are you dealing with that? Because as hard as you're fighting for Alberta, there seems to be people pushing back for independence, for separatism. How are you dealing with this rising tide of Alberta independence?
Well, as you may know, there has always been an undercurrent. As long as I've watched politics for, I think the only time anyone who got elected under a separatist banner was in 1982 in Old Stidsbury, Three Hills, and a couple of years later, Brian Mulroney came in, ended the National Energy Program, and that sentiment subsided. We saw a similar rise just toward the end of the Jean Chrétien era, and Harper came in, and it subsided again. And so I think that there was such high hopes that after 10 years of terrible Liberal policy, that we would see a change of government. And what I'm seeing is that the separatist sentiment is higher than I've ever witnessed it. And I think that that's just a demonstration of frustration and a real drawing of the line by Albertans. Things have got to change. We can't continue to be treated this way by Canada. And so that's my marching orders. I've got to get a new deal for Alberta, and that's what I'm going to spend my time over the next few months trying to do.
So I'm assuming that's what the Alberta Accord is all about. I listened to your news conference about that a week and a half ago. Do you think that is resonating with people who might otherwise be favoring Alberta independence? Are they looking at that as an alternative to separating from Canada?
I would love to have a big success and breakthrough in addressing the issues that I know are causing the tension. So part of the Alberta Accord is let's get once and for all a clear statement that we will not be threatening export tariffs or export restrictions on Alberta oil and gas. Number two, let's address the issue of getting economic corridors. There's a lot that gets solved when people have good paying jobs and are able to take care of themselves, their families, and their communities. It's the loss of about $500 billion worth of investment that has people so upset. So let's get economic corridors, north, south, east, and west, so that we're able to build our pipelines so that we can get all of our products to market. Third area is, I call it the 9 bad laws. There are 9 policies from the no more pipelines built, to the tanker ban, to net zero power grids, to net zero cars, and on, that have created a chill in the investment in oil and gas at a time when the world needs more energy security. So all of those need to either be repealed or substantially revised. And then finally, I think Albertans have had enough with seeing small provinces contribute to to Ottawa so that their money can be spent in larger, more powerful provinces like Quebec or Ontario. That's got to end. The four big provinces of BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec should be able to stand on their own 2 feet. They should get the same amount of equal per capita transfers, and we should stop having small provinces subsidize the large ones. So those are the things that we're working towards, and I think if we can address some of those, then we'll end up being able to move forward with a true Team Canada approach, one where Team Alberta feels a part of it.
Sure. What are your initial impressions about Prime Minister Mark Carney? I was highly critical, and I am highly critical of Mark Carney as a globalist, as somebody who has read Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin and calls them his political heroes in his most recent book. I'm not convinced that Mark Carney is really on side with people like you and I, or people like Vote for You in Alberta, or who vote conservative nationally. I'm not convinced that Mark Carney has had a metamorphosis in his political leanings. He's talking like a conservative in many ways, a small c conservative. He's talking about affordable housing. He's talking about an accord, getting provinces together. He's talking about having something that works for all of Canada, but it's very vague. It's very vague. What are your initial impressions of Mark? Do you think this is somebody we can trust?
Whenever I talk to socialists, I always try to remind them that in order to spend money, you have to make it first. And this is the real conundrum that Canada has been in the last 10 years, is that they have consistently suppressed all of the wealth generating activities, investment generating activities, and tax generating activities to pay for their aspirations. The socialists have no problem coming up with big, expensive national programs, but if you want to pay for those, you need a vibrant economy. This was something that the Labour government in New Zealand understood, is that you have to have a red tape free environment in order to foster business investment and growth, in order to generate the revenues to pay for the services. And I hope that that's where we'll end up, because Alberta is masterful at being able to create wealth and create jobs. We've created in some quarters 90% of all the private sector jobs in the country. So we have a bit of a different culture and approach here. We don't look at government as a first resort. We look at it as a last resort. So let's get the economy going, and then we can talk afterwards. Once everybody is doing well, then you can talk about the priorities for government spending. They put the cart before the horse, as it were. They want to spend the money before they make it. And that is what's driven down our GDP growth. It's what's driving down our wage growth. It's driving down our living standards compared to other OECD countries. And I think Canadians in this last election said enough is enough. They wanted a moderate government that was going to address these issues, take a true Team Canada approach, develop our markets on all fronts, trade more with each other, find new markets to trade with internationally. And that's what I think Albertans and Canadians expect the new Prime Minister to do.
Now, Mark Carney's talked about his supposed support for a pipeline. He hasn't specifically said he's going to get rid of Bill C-69, which banned pipelines in this country. Do you think he's serious about this? Because he's also said he wants a consensus, and the government of BC, which is diametrically opposed to what your government is doing in terms of opening up energy options in this country. David Eby is very much in the pocket of the net zero environmental extremists. Do you think he's looking at that as an excuse not to reopen the debate about pipelines across Canada?
Well, I would say that you certainly would never look at. I don't think there's any country in the world that would look at the valuable assets that we have and then take the view, keep it in the ground. When we've done a valuation, because we've got about 1.8 trillion barrels of oil in place, of which 165 billion are recoverable at today's technology. That's a $9 trillion asset. I don't think that there is a single national project that would generate more GDP growth than being able to export another 1 million barrels per day of bitumen off the BC coast. That alone would generate 20 billion a year in GDP, of which about 40% goes to governments to pay for their priorities. So you can't have an approach that's everything but what Alberta creates. Yeah, we want gold mines and zinc mines and lithium mines and uranium mines, all the critical minerals, but we don't want Alberta oil and gas. That's just not going to fly with Albertans. And I don't think it'll fly with Canadians. I think that with the change in our relationship with the United States, everybody got rocked to their core. I think everybody took for granted that we will always have a great relationship north-south with our American neighbor. And that's called into question now. And if we're going to be a strong and independent and sovereign country, we need to trade more with each other. We need to support each other. And we need to be able to get all of our products to market so that we can support our friends and allies internationally. So I would say that that's what I'm putting forward. When it comes to the issue of carbonization or decarbonization, do know that our bitumen producers have been on this track for many years. The Pathways Project is the 6th largest oil sands producers, and they've already developed a proposal for how they would be carbon neutral by 2050 through carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We already got all of our hubs, as well as at-scale projects that we have developed, bringing in through interties hydroelectric power or nuclear power from Manitoba, BC, and Saskatchewan, as well as direct air capture. There's a company called Carbon Engineering that has just returned to Alberta so that they could experiment on that last mile, how to capture CO2 from the atmosphere and turn it into useful products. And there's already some really interesting innovation happening on that front. So if we can put that forward as a package, yeah, let's do the Pathways project, which cost about 10 or 20 billion. Let's get a new bitumen pipeline, which generates about 20 billion a year in revenue. That seems to be a pretty good bargain. And that's what we're going to look at doing. So yes, I understand that there are issues that we have to address that are of concern to our customers, that are of concern to our neighbors in other provinces. But I think that those are all surmountable. I think that we can work together on it.
Well, you vaguely mentioned President Donald Trump there. I don't think there's too many Albertans who are really worried Donald Trump any more than I don't think there are a lot of Canadians who are really concerned about Donald Trump. But I have to say this. I think you inspired Donald Trump. You gave the courage to Donald Trump to start talking about two genders in the United States, because you introduced legislation in Alberta that allowed for two genders in sports, for biological men to stop competing against women in high school and university sports. And I can't tell you how many people told me, thank God for a premier like Danielle Smith with the guts to say that, to say common sense. And I think you inspired Donald Trump.
Well, I'm sure he would probably say that it was his own idea, but I can tell you that we were inspired by the Cass report in the UK. I've been watching that for some time, and it's the most comprehensive study that has been done on children with gender dysphoria. And what they have found is that there really wasn't very good evidence for puberty blockers or for early gender reassignment surgery. There used to be an attitude of watchful waiting and just seeing how kids manage through puberty and then supporting them when they're grown up enough to make the decisions about what pathway they want to go down. So that's where we got our inspiration. And I've always framed this out as supporting the rights of children to be able to have the right to make their own decisions about whether they want to have kids of their own one day. And if you start a process that is going to limit that too early, then I think you're going to create all kinds of problems that will have to be dealt with in the future. In addition, we also saw alarming stories about how teachers and other adults were interfering in the relationship with kids and helping them transition without parents' knowledge. And that's just not on. Parents need to know what's going on with their kids. And then finally, on the issue of fairness in sport and safety in sport, there are some sports, quite frankly, with larger, stronger born male athletes where it's not safe for young women and girls to participate in that. So we want to be able to support all athletes with more co-ed divisions, but we also want to be able to preserve the right of women and girls to compete against other women and girls. And sort of the next round that we found where the school system has gone a bit too far is some of the library books that we're seeing in K to 9 that are outright pornographic. We've had to show the images with warnings on them. And I can tell you, if you aren't prepared to show some of the images to your adult viewers, then 7 and 8 and 9-year-old kids shouldn't be seeing them either. So this is, I think, what we have to be aware of. There's always a balance. There's always, sometimes you need to have to push the envelope on certain issues, but sometimes the envelope gets pushed a little bit too far, and it has to be brought back to the center. And that's what we've done in Alberta. We're going to find other ways to do more of that.
And you're certainly doing that, and I think that should be applauded. I'm very concerned about two bills that are in front of the House of Commons right now, and I'm not hearing much from the Conservative Party of Canada or Pierre Poilievre about them. The first of which is Bill C2, which is a stronger borders bill. Sounds great. We all want stronger borders. But when you read through the bill, of course, you find out that it's about the RCMP and Canada Post opening our mail. It's about massive government surveillance of the internet. And it's about banning cash transactions above $10,000. And John Carpay, of course, who is with the Alberta group that is fighting this very, very strongly, will be on the show next week. Mm-hmm. And he has told me that he believes that $10,000 can be very easily reduced to $5,000 to $200 overnight, and we have a cashless society. Are you concerned about Bill C2 and what it could mean for Canada?
Well, I know that people are very concerned about the potential of only having a central bank digital currency, to the point where when the Bank of Canada started doing consultations on it, they pulled the proposal because there was just massive a backlash to it, and for good reason. I think Canada might be the only country in the world that froze bank accounts during COVID because people donated $50 to the trucker convoy. They went way too far. And so they've broken the trust of people. It doesn't surprise me at all. So people want to be able to have options to pay in different currencies, pay in American currency, pay in cash. And so I'll watch and see what it is that they end up doing. That being said, we do have a serious problem in Canada that the Americans have been pressing us on. And that is dealing with the very serious problem of fentanyl dealers. And one of the issues that has been discovered is that major banks, as well as the casinos, have been an avenue for money laundering for some of these really bad operators, organized crime, and other criminals who are using our system in order to be able to victimize Canadians. So I want to be open-minded that that's what this is really about. But I understand why people would be concerned that the government goes too far, because they have gone too far in the past. And I'll have to wait and see how it's implemented. But I can assure you there's voices like yours and others that if they do end up going too far, I have no doubt that you'll be making sure that those stories get told.
I certainly hope so, because we haven't seen too much opposition from the official opposition on this. But final question to you, Premier. Are you concerned about Bill C5, which of course is Mark Carney's trademark legislation about eliminating the provincial trade barriers? However, there's a poison pill in this bill, like there is in everything Mark Carney introduces. And there was a recent article up that was taken down from The Economist a couple of days afterwards because it actually analyzed that poison pill, which could be potentially taking away provincial rights over natural resources. And every time I hear Mark Carney talk about one economy across the country, I'm thinking, is he talking about usurping provincial rights over natural oil, natural gas and oil? Is that what he's really after here? Because Pierre Trudeau tried that. That was a massive grab in the 1970s. And thank God Peter Lougheed stood up to him in those days and said, forget it, not going to happen. I know you would do the same thing if Mark Carney tried to usurp provincial power over natural resources. Do you think that's something he might actually try, though?
There isn't a mechanism to do it. I mean, statute law is subordinate to the Constitution. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. And in there, it's very clear that natural resources and electricity distribution are the purview of the provinces. This is the reason why we have had to launch so many actions against the federal government, because they behave in an illegal way. They pass bills that they have no right to pass. And then we have to fight for months or years to try to get them to repeal it. And so that's part of the reason why I passed the Alberta's sovereignty within a United Canada Act. It's basically our notwithstanding clause on federal laws that are unconstitutional. What we basically said is that if you try to pass a law in our area of jurisdiction, we're putting up a shield. We're just not going to enforce it. And we're going to do everything we can to thwart its implementation. So we've had to invoke it a couple of times. We had to invoke it on electricity. We're quite prepared to go forward and develop our own natural gas power plants if the federal government does not repeal its net zero power regs. We hope they do. And we've also taken ownership of our emissions data. So emissions have to be reported to us, and then we'll be able to collectively share that with the rest of the country. And we'll also make sure that that federal agents aren't able to go on to federal or to oil and gas sites, because those are critical infrastructure. So there's lots of things that we could do to stand in the way of unconstitutional laws, and we're prepared to fight them tooth and nail. We want them to be law-abiding. We want them to follow the law. We want them to follow what it is that the drafters of the Constitution intended for how our country should work. They haven't done a very good job of that in the last 10 years. I think that there's an opportunity for a reset, and we're about to get a table together of a team from the Alberta side with a team from the federal side, and just work through these problems one by one. I'm going to stay with a stance of hopefulness that maybe we have really turned the page, but you'll have to have me back in a few months' time. I'll know for sure then.
Well, we certainly would love that, because I think as the history of Alberta is being written, your name is up there with names like Peter Lougheed and Ralph Klein, people who fought for Alberta and Canada within Canada. And there's so many viewers who just love to see you on this show. Thank you for joining me today, because believe me, so many Canadians, not just Albertans, look to you as a leader who is leading the province, not following the prime minister. So thank you for the hard work you do, and we love you here at this station.
Oh, well, thanks for that, David. I don't think anyone should be surprised. I said I was going to put Alberta first, and I intend to do that every single day. So I appreciate the feedback, and we'll talk to you again.
Okay, thank you, Premier Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. We love you here. We'll see you again soon. Thank you for
Thanks,
joining
David.
us today. And that, of course, was Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in conversation with me yesterday. I think Danielle Smith gets it about what Canadian politicians, and specifically conservative, small state conservative politicians, should be doing, is going on broadcasts like this. And Pierre Poilievre could learn a lesson or two from Danielle Smith. And I think I think he could emulate her media participation. Let's put it that way. But I've perhaps been a little bit hard on the Conservative Party in terms of Bill C2, and I have been reminded that immigration critic Michelle Rempel Garner has been actually discussing this issue. And I'm just going to find that for you. And here we go.
Questions, comments? The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Speaker, if Bill C2 passes, it would allow CSIS police and peace officers to demand personal info from online service providers without a warrant, based only on vague suspicions of potential crime or legal breaches on any act of Parliament. Whether a Canadian uses an online service, where they use it, and when they use it is personal information, and the government has not provided a charter statement for the same. If this bill combined with Bill C-63, the government could target whatever the government deems to be spreading hateful content, and it would combine with C-63 basically to essentially form censorship Voltron. The government has not indicated what policy concerns, aside from vague references to security, these provisions are needed for. These snooping provisions are a massive poison pill that shouldn't have been included in this bill. Why, once again, as they did with C-63, are the Liberals making Canadians choose between their civil liberties and their safety, and also fixing the broken immigration system that the Liberals broke themselves?
Minister of Public Safety.
for left.
And this, of course, is some more conversation on censorship that I've just discovered. This is from this week in the House of Commons, and I think the Conservative Party seems to be waking up about this.
Mr. Speaker, in the last Parliament, these Liberals forced through one piece of censorship legislation after another. Bill C-18, which of course stops the spread of news on social media outlets. Bill C-11, which controls what Canadians can see and say online. And then came Bill C-63, which is bloated censorship legislation, which actually brought in an internet czar and controls freedom of speech. The Liberals claim that this is a, quote, new government. So my curiosity is this. Whoever is in charge over there, of course, will they commit to respecting Canadians and, of course, stop censoring them?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for decades we've witnessed journalists losing their jobs, newsrooms shutting down, and local media going bankrupt. Access to fact-based information from coast to coast to coast is essential to keep Canadians informed. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, my Conservative colleague did not believe that preserving this pillar of our democracy is important. On our side, we chose to pass the Online News Act to ensure that journalists can continue their important work for our country, for our democracy, for our Canadian unity.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
So what I'm hearing is that this is the same old government, absolutely hell-bent on continuing to censor what Canadians can see and say online. My question is with regards to Bill C-63 and going forward. You see, C-63 doesn't just target predators, it targets opinions, it targets freedom of thought, it targets discourse within the online sphere. It institutes thought police, for crying out loud. It's a Trojan horse for further government control. So I ask again, in any future legislation going forward, will this Liberal government commit to respecting Canadians and making sure that they do not censor them?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, just about everything that the member said in her intervention is wrong. Bill C-11 ensures that Canadian artists get rewarded, as they should, by online platform, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-11 makes sure that Canadian content can be discovered by Canadians, by my kids, by all of our kids, instead of just international artists, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what what Bill C-11 does. It gives the opportunity for Canadians to discover Canadian artists, something we should all support, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. Mr.
18, which of course stops the spread.
This Liberal the opportunity for Canadians to discover
like that are why these.
Okay, and this is Andrew Lawton taking the floor about this. And so there has been some discussion, and there seems to be a realization that this is a toxic bill.
Liberals can't be trusted to regulate speech in this country. For years, this Liberal government has determined to censor what Canadians see and say online. From Bill C-11, which put the Liberals in control of YouTube algorithms, to Bill C-18, which squeezed out small and independent media, and to their thought crime Bill C-63. Now we learn in the National Post that cabinet ministers over there are all clamoring over who gets to be responsible for the latest online censorship law. So will the minister who gets to censor what Canadians say please reveal themselves now?
The Honourable Minister.
Even Google agreed that they should do this. Google will pay $100 million to help Canadian journalism in this country. An international US-based company would agree to do that, but the Conservative Party of Canada would vote against this, would prevent that from happening, would want to prevent our media from getting $100 million so that there's more local content, more journalists hired in our newsroom across the country. It is simply unthinkable. It is immoral, Mr. Speaker.
Continue to get from the Liberal government. So thank you again for watching this interview with Danielle Smith. It's not easy to get a premier on a podcast or broadcast like this. And I'm going to keep getting quality guests like that on the show. And Ezra Levant's going to join me next Tuesday to talk about Bill C2 because we need more journalists get upset about what this bill potentially means. So all I can say is I'm upset about it. Perhaps I was a little too upset about it the other day, but won't cross that line anymore. Thank you for watching today. It's been a pleasure. I'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know. God bless this country. Godspeed to all of you. This has been a live broadcast from Ottawa, and I'm David Krayden, and we'll be back tomorrow.